was a son. He was devoured by earth. There was a God. They call him the Father. And there was a means to make a valley with grace out of this hole that I've dug for me. He made a valley of grace where things would change, and maybe they'd take up the cross high again. The valley of grace was never the same after he had died.
Hi, I am Katina Horton, author, storyteller, love and freedom, toxic relationship recovery coach, and Bible teacher. And this is the Valley of Grace podcast. Today's Bible teaching is entitled 5 Statements That a Narcissistic Man Will Use to Reel You Back In. Once again, today's Bible teaching is entitled 5 Statements That a Narcissistic Man Will Use to Reel You Back In. And statement number 1 is, I rededicated my life to Christ. This may have happened 2 days ago. It could have been 2 weeks ago. It could have been 2 months ago, right? But this is his statement. And in your head, you're probably thinking, well, what does that equate to? Rededicating your life to Christ. There are tons of spiritual gifts out there, right? And your ex-narcissistic partner / husband may have been gifted in a lot of different ways, right? He may have been gifted with singing, with preaching, with teaching, with apostleship, with the gift of discernment, with the gift of prophecy, etc., right? Gift of prophetic singing, any and all of the above, right? As you taking a test, A, B, C, D, E, or all of the above. It might be all of the above, right? Every Sunday preaching on the pulpit, teaching Sunday school, etc. However, just because he has all of these spiritual gifts does not equal a heart transformation. Behavior modification does not equal heart transformation. And this is what's happening in this instance, that you end up getting caught up in the fact that he has stated that he has rededicated his life to Christ. And I was watching one movie, I've seen it so many different times, it's called The Preacher's Kid. And you've got Angie, who is caught up with this one guy, and Tank plays the guy who's very emotionally, verbally, and physically abusive towards her. And finally, in the end, she gets grounded and rooted in Christ. And the line he tries to use in order to get her back is they're standing outside in the rain, and he's in his raincoat. He's Angie, and trying to get her to come back to him. And she takes the bracelet that he gave her off, right? She takes it off and throws it on the ground in the rain. And he gave this bracelet to her after he just finished physically abusing her. But anyways, he wanted to let her know that he rededicated his life to Christ. So that is one phrase that a lot of narcissistic men would use because they know you're a Christian. They know that it's what you want to hear, and they're going to use it. And over in Romans 11:29, I want to read what it says right over there in Romans 11:29. It says, regarding the gospel, they are enemies. This is 28 and 29. For your advantage. But regarding election, they are loved because of the patriarchs, since God's gracious gifts and calling are irrevocable. So that means that the spiritual gifts that we have come without repentance. So a person does not have to have accepted Jesus into their heart as their Lord and personal Savior in order for them to have a spiritual gift, and you get caught up in that. Spiritual gifts have nothing to do with emotional maturity. Spiritual gifts do not have anything to do with heart transformation, right? spiritual gifts have been graced to us through the Holy Spirit, right? And they have nothing to do with that person going through intensive therapy, right? It has nothing to do with all of the physical, sexual, psychological, physiological abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse that you have had to endure and build resilience against. Rededicating your life to Christ has nothing to do with that, right? But this is a line that they will use to what? Reel you right back on in. When you think about a person, when they go fishing, at the end of that hook, there's a bait, right? And often that bait is the line that they will use to then hook you in, hook you, and then reel you right back on in to the same buffoonery that God had already helped you to escape from, right? Like the Israelites being able to escape from Egypt, right? And rededicating his life to Christ has nothing to do with him stopping the cheating, right? Sitting on the morning bench for hours crying crocodile tears for you, and going right back and doing the same exact thing over and over again. If there's no heart transformation, right? That does not equal, the behavior modification rather, does not equal heart transformation, right? And there are cases when it comes to the narcissistic men in general, there's a lot of self-hatred. There's misogynistic views and there's a lot of self-hatred. And this self-hatred causes what? Other hatred. And when you look at the case of David's son Amnon, who took advantage of his sister Tamar over in 2 Samuel 13, he had a lot of self-hatred going on. A lot of self-hatred. And when you look at that particular story, he went from idealizing her to devaluing her to discarding of her almost like in a matter of minutes, so to speak, right? And basically Tamar served as transitional supply for Amnon. And a person that represents transitional supply means it's a person who is just there to help an individual get over, go through their transition rather, right? It could be a job loss. It could be the loss of a parent, the loss of a spouse, a girlfriend, the loss of their dog or cat, job. It could be the loss of anything, right? Any kind of transition they're helping them to get over. And in her case, as sick as this sounds, with Amnon, his transition was getting over this spirit of perversion and lust that had taken hold of him, right, and wouldn't let go. So like I said, he went from idealizing her to devaluing her and then discarding of her. I'm going to read the verse that shows you, the verses rather, about the idealization. And I'm going to read in 2 Samuel, the 13th chapter. Some time passed. David's son Absalom had a beautiful sister named Tamar, and David's son Amnon was infatuated with her. This is where the idealization begins. Amnon was frustrated to the point of making himself sick over his sister Tamar because she was a virgin, but it seemed impossible to do anything to her. Amnon had a friend named Jonadab, a son of David's brother Shimei. So this so-called friend was his cousin. Jonadab was a very shrewd man, and he asked Amnon, "Why are you, the king's son, so miserable every morning? Won't you tell me?" Amnon replied, "I am in love with Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister." So he was basically saying to him, like, you the king's son, you don't have any reason to be walking around looking the way you do. What's going on with you, right? What's wrong with you? As some people say, right? That's basically how he was addressing Amnon. So that was the idealization. Now we want to get to the devaluation and the discard. We were going down to verse number 12 in 2 Samuel, the 13th chapter. "Don't, my brother," she cried. "Don't disgrace me, for such a thing should never be done in Israel. Don't commit this outrage. Where could I ever go with my humiliation and you You would be like one of the outrageous fools in Israel. Please speak to the king, for he won't keep me from you. But he refused to listen to her, and because he was stronger than she was, he disgraced her by raping her. There's the devaluation, right? Now we get into the discard. So Amnon hated Tamar with such intensity that the hatred he hated her with was greater than the love he had loved her with. Get out of here, he said. So see how quickly he went from idealization to devaluation to then discarding of her, right? He had trauma bonded with her and soul tied with her, and her life was messed up, right? The rest of her life, the trajectory of the rest of her life was just a hot mess and ruined because of what he did to her, right? So let's go to number 2, the second statement that a narcissistic man will use to reel you back in, right? You can use the word reel back in or hoover, right? To hoover maneuver you back in. Your mama thinks I'm a good man, right? And why would he say that? He's lent your mama his car. He's given her all kind of jewelry. He's paid for groceries for her so many times during the love bombing phase. He's appeared wise to her, appeared gracious, right? He told her how she looks good and this and that and the other and buttered her up with all these false words of affirmation, right? He's looked good to her with his suits, $500,000 suits, right? Smell good, piling up with cologne. And she don't know that's for all the other women, all the other side chicks he's got going on, right? And so then what happens is your mama ends up being in her own gaslit stage and cognitive dissonance and alternative reality, if you want to call it that. And she, say something to the effect, well, you ain't never had, that much stuff like you had when you were with him. Okay, so does that mean that you're supposed to go and get back with him because you never had as many material things, right? She's focused on the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, right? The boastful pride of life, right? She's focused on all 3 of those things. And that reminds me of watching the movie Waiting to Exhale, when the mom is talking to Whitney Houston on the phone. And I think Whitney Houston's character's name was Savannah. And basically, you could tell she had the belief system that just do whatever and allow whatever and put up with whatever, so you can keep the material stuff. And, that way you can stay happy because he's a good man and he's got a good job. It's more than having the appearance of a godly man, right? Having the appearance of being godly, right? It's more than that. It's more than having a good job and being a provider. There's so much more involved in that. There's reciprocity. There's being faithful, right? There's being a person of integrity. There's being a person that's trustworthy and honest, right? And a person of good character. You got all of that. Narcissistic men don't have any of that. They have the appearance of being godly, but they deny the power thereof. Third statement that a narcissistic man will use to reel you back in. I just got a new job, baby. Okay. So he just made $1,000, $1 million, not $1,000, but $1 million deal, right? Broker deal, because he's a financial man. And so that's supposed to pull you back in, right? And he knows that money appeals to the flesh. He knows you're probably going through some suffering on your own because you decided to leave him and you're trying to make it on your own, either by yourself or if you guys had kids together with the kids. So he's trying to appeal to your flesh, right? Because then all of a sudden you start thinking, yeah, that is something. He got a new job. Well, that is more money coming in. And I am struggling trying to make ends meet. Or I am struggling trying to keep the kids in their extracurricular activities and having their life, as normal as it was when we were together. Maybe I should go back. All of a sudden you get amnesia, right? You forget about all of the physical abuse you've had to endure. You forget about all of the financial abuse. You forget about all the emotional, verbal, and psychological abuse. All you can see is, okay, he is a good provider. He's got more money coming in. This would help us out. I am struggling, right? You forget about all of that. And the Israelites forgot too. Oh, I missed the steak. I missed the fish. I missed the cucumbers and the melon and the garlic and all of that. They forgot about the abuse. They forgot about the fact they were slaves to Pharaoh. They forgot about that, right? Pharaoh, the big narcissist, they forgot all about that. And the only thing they could think about was the food. And sometimes it's the same way. Because when you leave a narcissistic relationship, 9 times out of 10, you are leaving and you are struggling financially, right? Because that devastation cuts through every single area of your life. So when he starts pulling that he just got a new job, right? Or he's been promoted to a new position, things start sounding real good, right? The 4th statement that a narcissistic man will use to reel you back in. I'm in therapy now and I'm working on my childhood traumas and going through my, removing my mother and father wounds, right? They've been in therapy, learning all the different terminology for therapy, right? They got the therapist bamboozled. And hopefully it's not a toxic therapist, because some therapists out here are toxic, right? But they learn all the terminology and telling the therapist, oh, you know, I don't know what I'm going to do. The kids have rejected me. She has rejected me. I think I'm just going through a spirit of rejection right now, right? The therapist mentioned rejection about one thing. They then took it and ran with it and took it to a whole nother level. Well, you know, she's nothing but a control freak anyway. And a lot of times, the women that have been in those relationships do have control freak addiction issues that have had them numbing out to their own feelings and needs, etc., right? A lot of the women do. However, what narcissistic men do is that they use that and harp on that over and over again to deflect from their own toxic behavior, to deflect from the cheating, right? And being unfaithful, to deflect from all the gaslighting, right? And all of the emotional and psychological and physical abuse that you had to endure. They use the fact that you're a control freak as a license to have done everything under the sun that they have done, right? And they would use anything as a license, unfortunately. And all the therapists have to do is get sucked into that mess. And the next thing you know, he is projecting his own behavior all over onto you. And he's having this discussion with the therapist. And the therapist is now calling you the narcissist before it's all said and done with, right? So the next statement, it's not going to be long, right? But it's important. The next statement that a narcissistic man will use in order to reel you back in is to say, you didn't have to leave the way you did, baby. I could have helped you and the kids move out properly. Or if it was just you by yourself, you didn't have to leave the way you did, baby. I could have helped you move out properly. Okay, so he could have helped you move out by what? Convincing you to stay, by love bombing you, gaslighting you, making you look foolish for leaving the way you did, right? And then even along with that, had you tried to enlist his help, so to speak, right? Along with trying to convince you to stay and making it seem like it wasn't that bad, then going on and start talking about, well, this is my stuff anyway, right? This is my pots and pans. These are my kids you trying to take away from me, right? Those are my pictures on the wall and my couch I paid for, and my refrigerator, and my this and my that, when a lot of the stuff you bought before you guys even got together and got married, before the relationship even started, right? And then forbid if you have an inheritance that you had gotten before the relationship, all of a sudden, he's owning that too, right? He's taking ownership of that too. He's forgetting about the fact that you supported him in the background, right? He's forgetting about the fact that you put him through school. He's forgetting about all of that and that God blessed him through you. But now all of a sudden it's my this, my that, and my this, and my that. And so what I want to do is to read a story, a biblical story over in Genesis 31. And I'm going to start at the 19th verse. And this is what we're going to close with. And this is, I feel, is just so important in his home with the example that I just gave about him saying you didn't have to leave the way you did, and I would have helped you move out properly. Or either I would help you and the kids move out properly if you guys have kids, right? So we're over in Genesis 31, and we're at the 19th verse, and we're going to go down to, we're going to go all the way to 55. When Laban had gone to shear his sheep, Rachel stole her father's household idols, and Jacob deceived Laban the Aramean, not telling him that he was fleeing. He fled with all his possessions, crossed the Euphrates, and headed for the hill country of Gilead. Now, I want to stop right here just after reading just those 3 verses, because this is often what women end up doing. A lot of times, they don't necessarily get a chance to tell their narcissistic partner, I'm leaving you. They end up taking the kids, maybe the clothes on their back, or the clothes on their backs and maybe an overnight bag, and some of the important things, and just fleeing, right? That's basically what Jacob did. He felt that was his only way to get out, right? It was deceptive. And at the same time, when you're with a narcissistic individual, there are certain ways that you end up having to move for the sake of knowing, if I don't do it this way, it's probably not going to happen. On the 3rd day, and there's always this number 3, right? With God. Laban was told that Jacob had fled. So he took his relatives with him, pursued Jacob for 7 days. Remember, 7 is completion. There's another number. Overtook him in the hill country of Gilead. But God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream at night. Watch yourself. God warned him. Don't say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. When Laban overtook Jacob, Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country, and Laban and his relatives also pitched their tents in the hill country of Gilead. Laban said to Jacob, what have you done? You have deceived me and taken my daughters away like prisoners of war. I wonder why, right? The narcissistic man, what have you done? You taking my kids away from me? Okay. After you and the kids have been physically abused, emotionally, verbally, psychologically, otherwise. But they worried about now, this is my possessions, right? Why did you secretly flee from me? I wonder why, right? Deceive me and not tell me. I would have sent you away with joy and singing, with tambourines and lyres, but you didn't even let me kiss my grandchildren and my daughters. You have acted foolishly. Jacob did not act foolishly. He acted in the best interest of knowing what he needed to do in order to be able to get out of there properly, right? And what happened was that when he said you've taken, that you deceived him and did not tell him, I would have sent you away with joy and singing. Every time Laban had a party, that was part of his whole love bombing deal. He had a party, he fed them good, he got them drunk. Next morning they found out, yeah, what you agreed to is not really what you're going to get. He did it when Abraham's servant went to look for a wife for Isaac, right? And then he did it when Jacob came to Padanaram. And then he ended up saying that he wanted to marry Rachel. And then what happened was that Laban gave him Leah instead. And he didn't find out till the next morning after they ate and had too much to drink and all of that, right? So Jacob knows Laban's whole pattern of behavior. And that's one of the things that Dr. Henry Cloud, in his 5 different things you need in order to trust a person, you got to look at their pattern of behavior, right? For one of the things. And the second thing is you got to look at their character, right? So if their pattern of behavior is one way, and you're trying to self-gaslight and say it's another, that's problematic, right? So that's gaslighting right there, of saying that he would have done all of that. Yeah, he might have done all of that, but he was still going to love bomb and hoover in some kind of way, convince Jacob to stay. And that's why Jacob pieced out the way he did. So he would not end up being hoovered back into staying. And love bomb back into staying, right? So he would not be reeled back in. And then what happens, he said, I could do you great harm. But last night, the God of your father said to me, watch yourself. Don't say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. Now you've gone off because you long for your father's family. But why have you stolen my gods? Jacob didn't steal his gods. Rachel did. Jacob had no clue that had happened. Neither did Leah. The thing about it was that, once again, it's more gaslighting. He said that you've gone off because you long for your father's family. No, I'm going off because what? I need to get away from you for my own emotional and psychological and physical safety. But notice how he turns and twists that around from the truth. And that's what narcissistic men will do. When they're in hopes of reeling you back in, they'll say, oh, well, you just want to be with your mama anyway. You always want to spend time over at your family's house. When you decide to leave to protect yourself, right, it's all your fault then, right? And your family's fault. Jacob answered, I was afraid, for I thought you would take your daughters from me by force. And that's probably what he would have done. If you find your gods with anyone here, he will not live. Before our relatives, point out anything that's yours and take it, right? And so then when we go further down to verse 36, and this is still Genesis 31, it says, Then Jacob became incensed and brought charges against Laban. What is my crime, he said to Laban. What is my sin that you have pursued me? So in other words, he's like, why did you come after me in the first place, right? I don't owe you anything. You've searched all my possessions. Have you found anything of yours? Put it here before my relatives and yours, and let them decide between the two of us. I've been with you these 20 years. So he's letting you know I worked for you 20 years, right? Through all this drama, trickery, blah, blah, blah. Although, like they say, what goes around comes around, Jacob ended up reaping what he had sown with his brother Esau, right? He said, your ewes and female goats have not miscarried. I've not eaten the rams for your flock. I did not bring you any of the flock torn by wild beasts. I myself bore the loss. You demanded payment from me for what was stolen by day or by night. There I was. The heat consumed me by day, and the frost by night, and sleep fled from my eyes. For 20 years in your household I served you. 14 years for your 2 daughters, 6 years for your flocks, and you have changed my wages 10 times. There's another number, 10 with the Lord, right? Authority. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, the fear of Isaac, had not been with me, certainly now you would have sent me off empty-handed. He's right. But God has seen my affliction and my hard work, and he has issued his verdict last night. Then Laban answered Jacob, the daughters are my daughters. Here we go with this whole thing with that my. That's narcissistic. The sons, my sons, and the flocks, my flocks. So he forget about the fact Jacob worked for all of this. Everything you see is mine. That not a clue? But what can I do today for these daughters of mine, or for the children they have born? Come now, let's make a covenant, you and I. Let it be a witness between the two of us. If the Lord hadn't warned him, he probably would have tried to kill Jacob, or who knows what it would have been he would have tried to do, right, with his men. So Jacob picked out a stone and set it up as a marker. Then Jacob said to his relatives, gather stones. And they took stones, and they made a mound, then ate there by the mound. Laban named the mound Jegar Sahadutha, but Jacob named it Gilead. Then Laban said, this mound is a witness between me and you and me today. Therefore the place was called Gilead, and also Mizpah, for he said, may the Lord watch between you and me when we are out of each other's sight. If you mistreat my daughters or take other wives, though no one is with us, understand that God will be a witness between you and me. Laban also said to Jacob, look at this mound and the marker I have set up between you and me. This mound is a witness, and the marker is a witness, that I will not pass beyond this mound to you, and you will not pass beyond this mound and this marker to do me harm. Why in the world would Jacob even want to entangle himself with Laban after all that buffoonery he'd gone through? He'd already learned his lesson. Okay, the God of Abraham and the gods of Nahor, the gods of their father, will judge between us. And Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. Then Jacob offered a sacrifice on the mountain and invited his relatives to eat a meal. So he controlled the situation at this point. He didn't allow Laban to say, oh, let's eat and let's drink and all of that. He already knew what eating and drinking meant to Laban, right? Love bombing, right? Gaslighting, another 7 to 10 years. That wasn't going to happen anymore. Laban got up early in the morning, kissed his grandchildren and daughters, and blessed them. Then Laban left to return home, right? And so once again, I want to just read the 5 statements that a narcissistic man will use when he tries to reel you back in. Statement number 1. You know I rededicated my life to Christ. Statement number 2. Your mama thinks I'm a good man. Statement number 3. I just got a new job. Statement number 4. I'm in therapy now and I'm working on my childhood trauma and my mother and father wounds. Statement number 5. You didn't have to leave the way you did. I could have helped you move out properly. Those are 5 statements that narcissistic men will use to reel you back in. I hope you've been blessed by this Bible teaching, and until next time. Again, I am Katina Horton, the Love and Freedom Toxic Relationship Recovery Coach. Be blessed.
There was a son. He was devoured by earth. There was a God. They call him the Father. And there was a means to make a valley with grace out of this hole that I've dug for me. He made a valley of grace where things would change, and maybe they'd take up the cross high again. The valley of grace was never the same after he had died. The love that refines, there's no sense in trying to do it on my own. He gave more than I could have known. He turned those valleys into places to learn, instead of burn and perish away. And nights never so cold without his grace. How could I say that I've seen the world from his great love? How could I know what he could love? How would I've seen what he had in store for me if I didn't give up and let him be my valley of grace, where things would change and maybe they'd take up the cross high again? The valley of grace never was the same after he had died. The love love that refines. So much I wish I could give back, but I'm not intact to be sharing all of that. You took the price to give me that life, and now it's never gonna fade away. When I see I need more of him, he whispers the sweetest of mercies upon my ears, and I won't go back the way it was again, again, again. And now a valley of grace where things would change. I've seen the lights of valley of grace where things have changed. Oh, I've seen so much for me.